I know a woman who has been frustrated with the pain, the fear, and the anger in her life. Who wouldn't be? She had studied real love for a while and felt it on a number of occasions, which is even more important. And she wrote to me and said, I was talking to lots of people and getting on calls to feel loved. And at first it helped, but then the anxiety would come right back. Then I was talking to a wise person about how we've lived in our heads for so long, and I realized that that's what the problem was, at least for me. I was constantly thinking and imagining and planning and obsessing. I thought I was doing that because I was anxious. So I thought I was doing all this thinking because of my anxiety, but now I'm thinking maybe it was the other way around. The constant whirling thoughts are the habit I've had for ages. From the time I was a little kid, it was just constant thinking. And just parenthetically to those who are listening, the more we're afraid, the more we think. Well, how do I protect myself from this? What do I do now? What's going to happen? What's next? We look around for danger once we get in fear. So she confirms that and says, this is a habit I've had for ages, the constant whirling thoughts. And the anxiety comes from all that crazy thinking. And who wouldn't? The more you think, the more anxious you feel. I once knew a man who, every time I would talk to him by Skype, he would start off the call with, I'm afraid, I'm afraid, I'm afraid. And then 20 times during the phone call, and I said to him, I want you to listen to this. I'm afraid, I'm afraid, I'm afraid, I'm afraid, I'm afraid, I'm afraid, I'm afraid. And I said that, 20 times in a row. And I said, I'm afraid now. You say a thing enough times, you become afraid. You imagine potential threats enough times in a row, and you'll become afraid, which is what this woman calls anxious. She continues, I was living in an alternate reality where a million things were happening at once, all the time. So no wonder I was feeling so strung out. Good point. Every thought is a kind of reality. Every real thing that happens is preceded by some kind of thought. And so if we have enough crazy thoughts going around, eventually we create a crazy world. And then we become afraid. You continue. So I decided to completely quit thinking, that's no small thing, about anything that wasn't actually happening. So pretty hard to just stop thinking altogether. But I decided that if it wasn't happening now, I wasn't going to think about it. If it happened in the past, too bad, that's over. If it might happen in the future, well, there's no sense thinking about that. No sense dwelling on might. And when I did that, just for a short period of time, all the fear evaporated. I'm so glad that I found a simple solution. Right now, I have to stop myself from going off somewhere in my head every minute or less. I've been in this habit of thinking, and being afraid for so long that just about every minute I have to go, no, that's not happening now. But if I do, the change is instantaneous and dramatic. It's incredible how no monumental effort is required. I can just choose to stop any thought that's not about now. And life is instantly light and fun again. Wow, kid, that's a pretty clever way of dealing with anxiety. It works for you. I know a number of other people that it works for. To quit, in your words, thinking about anything that isn't actually happening. But it tends not to work. It works for you, and you're going to see the reason here in a minute. It tends not to work if we don't have something to replace those thoughts with. We can't just say, I'm not going to think about the future. I'm not going to think about the past. We need something to replace them with, like, the truth. which would be what's happening now, that we are loved now, and the feelings that we are loved now. And then the racing thoughts may disappear. If they return, we can replace them with what's happening right now again. It's a very useful tool. We need to feel loved, and we need things to remember that might help us, like stopping old patterns and habits like you just did, like overthinking, like obsessing, like thinking ill of other people, like expressing our anger. Everybody has a different thing. You have racing thoughts. Some people have anger. Some people have resentment. Some people may have to decide, I absolutely refuse to entertain. This proved recently just phenomenally successful for a man that I know. I can think anything that I want to, but I can't think anything that has to do with anger or resentment. Can't do it. I refuse. He decided to give it up just like you'd give up cocaine. I'm not going to do it. Now, does that mean he never did it? No, he did do it. But each time he did it, he would stop and he would say, what's true? He would name some people that love him. He would remember that God loves him, and the thoughts would go away. But you have to have the love in order to make the thoughts go away. You can't just throw the thoughts away and create a vacuum. It will suck in something. And if you don't have the truth, well, it'll suck in lies and fear. New subject. Here's somebody who says, I've been having a hard time at work. I started a new job, and they're just not training me properly. I work in the service industry, in food preparation. They just expect me to know things. And I'm not happy with this. I need to tell the managers that their training really needs some work. Tempting and undoubtedly true that their training stinks, but you have a tendency to criticize other people. And now you're complaining about how you're trained. You're going to pretty much have to give that up, because it's going to rob you of happiness, number one. And second, they're going to hate it. You're a brand new employee, and you're going to tell them that their training program is no good, as opposed to you're just inexperienced and don't know how to do the job. Which of the two do you think they're going to choose? That they're at fault? There isn't a chance in this world they're going to do that. They're going to blame it on you. They're going to write you off as impossible. They're going to say, oh my goodness, she's been on the job for 4 days and she's teaching us how to train her. Fire her or put her someplace far away from anybody that matters. So what can you do? Because I believe you that they're not training you. Don't wait to be trained. In fact, we just sit around and we wait to be trained. We wait for people to be considerate. We wait for them to be thoughtful. We wait for people to read our minds. We live in this crazily idealistic world where we can just sit still and, well, you know, sunshine and happiness and lollipops are just going to come our way. Not likely. So don't wait to be trained. If you ask for help for each task, see, that's what you don't want to have to do. Each time you come to a job where you don't know how to do it, you don't want to have to go find somebody to show you how. You want them to have just properly trained you before you begin. It doesn't usually work out like that. So when they say, go do whatever in the shop, well, just go and try to do whatever. And if you can't figure it out, then you grab somebody and everybody's going to be busy. I get it. And say, I need you for 30 seconds to show me how to do this. You keep doing those 30 seconds over and over again, and you will end up trained, on the job training. Well, it would be nice if they pre-trained you, but they're not going to. So you end up trained instead of waiting for them to do it right and then criticizing them when they fail. It sounds idealistic that they would train you. Yes, they should, if you like that word, but it's not happening. If you keep blaming, however, eventually they're going to blame you. No kidding. And then you're going to be gone and you're going to wonder, well, what did I do? I just wasn't properly trained. Yeah, you complained about it instead of doing something. So just get the training, item by item. After I wrote to her, she kept complaining about the details of not getting trained properly. Message after message by text and WhatsApp and emails, and she just kept saying how they don't do this and it was all their fault. I said, honey, it doesn't matter. You want people to change for you. That doesn't very often happen. Change yourself. I talked about this in a recent video chat where my son, the business professor, gives a lecture to executives, and his first slide says, quit whining and figure it out. And in the corner, it says, Dad, because he'd come to me and he was whining, and I told him to just figure it out. Doesn't help to whine. And people end up resenting you and you end up fired. You can do this. Mostly just do your job. I know there are many things you don't know how to do. Do the ones you do and ask about those you don't. You're expecting, now listen slowly, you're expecting people who just barely can handle food preparation. You're expecting them also to be trained educators or trainers. No way. None of them knows how to train. They're all put in a position where they're just keeping up with their own job. They're in the service industry. They serve food to customers who are always in a hurry and expect to be given their order right now. And you expect them to somehow do their job and then magically turn to you and give you 30 seconds and offer to help train you to do things. Yeah, they're way too busy to do that. So you have to make it happen. Not only ask them questions, but since they're busy, watch them. That's a relatively effortless thing. Yes, I know they have expectations of you too, to be busy. But you're new, so their expectations are lower. Watch the experienced people, and you're going to see the fastest way, usually. Even if the training manual says A, B, C, D, watch the people who do it all the time, and you'll discover that A, C, B, D works better because they actually do it. The person who wrote the training manual very likely didn't. Then you do it yourself, show them an example of what you did, and ask how it went. You continue. One of my colleagues criticizes what I do, tells me to work faster, and interrupts me while I'm working. Yeah, well, that's just her. Kid, use her. Use her knowledge. Ignore the fact that she's irritable and controlling. Tell her how much you appreciate her telling you how to do things better. Instead of going, well, she's just not nice to me. Honey, she's giving you the instructions you want. You said you wanted training, but see, you want it also delivered perfectly. This lady prepares food. She's not a trainer. Be glad that she offers you anything at all. Do you do that? Be grateful. Regularly. If not, you're not utilizing your resources. Gratitude works better than criticism. Your colleague doesn't remember what it was like in the beginning for her. She doesn't. None of us remember once we get doing a job, but it's like stop in a neighborhood and ask somebody who's walking on the street, where is blank street? And they go, oh, well, it's left, right. And remember where Andersons used to live, but the house is burned down, then you turn right. And all of the instructions make perfect sense to them because they live there. They can't remember what it's like not to live there, not knows what's going on. That's what it's like at work. They look at you funny like, well, it's really easy. You just do this. Well, it's not that easy if you've never done it. So lower your expectations of her ability to train you. You have to learn to live with it. She treats you like it's stupid also, in part, because it makes her feel better. So what do? You get your training. We've talked about this, task by task. You thank them for their time. You ignore the fact that they were rude and inconsiderate. You say, I didn't know that. Thank you for showing me. Thank you for telling me that. When they tell you that you didn't do something right, ignore the criticism. They just gave you the training you were looking for. You just wanted it delivered with sweetness. Oh, good luck. So see, it's all in your court. They're not going to change. Well, she went on and on some more about how they don't do it right, and I repeated myself. End of email. She writes another email. Days later, she says, today I put into practice exactly what you said. I asked for help. I thanked people. I listened. I said sorry when I made a mistake. I probably need to change this to a thank you instead of sorry. And I worked hard. I'm glad to refocus my attention from thinking about what they're not doing toward what I can do. Well, good for you, kid. Not very many people can make this change. You continue. I noticed the effect it's had on my colleague who was impossibly critical. When I thanked her for correcting me, she softened. I could see it right in front of my face. Her face just softened. Yeah, people tend to respond to being cared about. People tend to respond to gratitude. They like to be recognized. And you did that with her. And the natural result of her feeling loved is that she becomes more helpful to you. You can't control her response. And you never want to be nice to somebody so that they will be nice to you. That's just a clever form of manipulating. But you've discovered how nice it is for everyone if you're kind. You changed your judgment, event, judgment, feeling, reaction. Instead of seeing them as difficult and impossible, you changed your judgment to, they're doing the best they can. I'm going to thank them for it. And everything else changed because you did that. And you've provided a lesson for who knows how many hundred other people are listening to this right now. So nice work. New subject. We tend to think that we know ourselves. In fact, I've watched many people claim that they're really proud of how at least they really know who they are. But on the whole, we really don't. Only occasionally do we even recognize the choices we make when we think we're aware of them. Most of the time, however, we don't make conscious choices. We just react to pain. Now, I've said this before. Here's a practical illustration. I was talking to a couple in front of me on the couch. She said something kind of snotty and critical about him, and then just slid past it like she hadn't done it. You know, it's kind of like she was talking along, she reached out and just kind of, emotionally speaking, just quickly punched him in the face twice and then just kept talking like she hadn't done it. He didn't flinch. And she went to change the subject. I stopped. I stopped her, I stopped him. I turned to him and I said, she just attacked you. He was bewildered. He was utterly unaware that she had been, frankly, pretty snotty and critical. So I repeated to her, you know that you just attacked him, right? And then to him, I said, she just attacked you. You didn't know it, but you felt it. I watched your face and you immediately detached from the conversation. Now, this is a really important little pattern because it happens, pretty much all day with people all over the world. I explained to them both what all of you have experienced. She, whoever, pick one of them. I say she because she did it in this case. Could be him. It could be two hims. It doesn't matter. So she says something that seems innocent, at least to her, but is hurtful. It's critical and mean. And he says, it's no big deal, or doesn't even notice it. but sometimes he will notice that she does it, and then either out loud or silently will go, oh, it was just a little thing. So what does he do? Now, pay attention, because we all do this. Whoever's talking to you says some critical thing and you go, it's not really worth bringing it up. It was just like a little poke. Like, you're in a crowd and somebody brushes by and they just move your shoulder a little bit and you go, it's not worth shooting them over. Then she says another critical thing. And he goes, oh, that wasn't a big deal either. He blows it off. Yeah, but here's the problem. Now we have two things piled up. Like, one plate is fairly stable on the counter. You put two plates on the counter, yeah, it's a little easier to knock them over. He keeps doing that. And by the time he feels it, he keeps blowing it off. And by the time he finally says something, he's reacting to 20, quote, little things, end quote. He's reacting to or trying to control 20 plates that are piled up. Try that sometime. Walk quickly somewhere holding 20 plates. And so by the time he finally reacts, he's got 20 plates falling all over the floor, breaking, crashing, tripping people, shards cutting people's legs. He reacts big to the last plate. And she's baffled, going, well, but all I did was, and metaphorically speaking, all she did was put on one plate. One little thing. But it's not one little thing. It's the 20th little thing. So then, because she thinks that he's overreacting, she attacks him, saying he's overreacting. Then he either fights her or, just as bad, he believes her that he is overreacting. That's just as awful, because then he feels small and insignificant. And because he feels small and insignificant, what's he going to do when she puts on the 21st plate? Nothing. Or when she starts stacking the 20 from the beginning. He just keeps letting it happen. All these little things slide, and by the time I meet them, he's become nothing. She regards him as oversensitive and reacting, and he's just kind of disappeared. He doesn't understand what's happening. She doesn't understand, but they are locked in a mortal struggle over continuously building issues that nobody ever deals with when they're small. We have to pay attention to how we feel. We have to. Or we can't deal with our fears, our anger, and our frustration. And then it builds and it turns into a battle of reactions to fear with other people, which by the time you get to 20 plates high, there's no solution. You've all played, there are various little stacking games where just do it with your 2-year-old, and you stack blocks, and the third block's a little off. It's, not lined up with the others. Oh, no big deal. So you do the 4th and the 5th, and then eventually you get to about the 12th block. There's no place to put it. No matter how you put the 12th block on, the pile will fall. And that's what happens in relationships. We have to pay attention to the first one and the second one, or eventually it becomes too late. New subject. I was talking to a man who has been given a great deal of unconditional love in recent years. He was raised in a family where he was never valued, never cared for, never treated with tenderness. Oh my, when I met him, he just bled from deep wounds all over. And his view of the world was changed by the pain. Because of all that pain, the world had become defined as a scary, painful place. And why wouldn't it? Event, judgment, feeling, reaction. He had 2,952 events in a row that were painful. Let's see. Judgment. What would the judgment be from that? The world is a painful, scary place. And that judgment is absolutely set in concrete. Feeling, fear, reaction. That varies. He might attack, he might run, he might feel small, he might disappear. Lots of reactions. But it all started with the pain. Pain changes everything. So to illustrate, months ago, he said, sometimes I just want to stand up and scream. All I want is somebody to listen to me and understand me. This is a little subtle, so hang on. Follow the thread. He said, I just want somebody to listen to me and understand me. Well, he did. He found a wise person who did exactly that, who listened to him carefully and understood him. Then he said, all I want is for somebody to genuinely care about me. So first he wanted listening and understanding and then care, and he found that. He said, all I want is a job that is fulfilling. He found that. I just need a place of my own. Then I'll be happy, where I don't have to share space with other people and listen to their noise and all that stuff, and a place that's not too far from my work. He found it. He said, I'm just not happy. People don't call me as opposed to him calling them. Surprise, meaning not a surprise. He was never happy at any stage along the way for what he was receiving. Never happy with what he has. Not grateful. And people don't call him. Why? It's really not so very fun to be around somebody who's ungrateful and complaining and whining and acting like a victim. Then he said, well, I just need more free time. I said, well, you found a job and you found a place that's closer to your job, so you don't have to travel very far. So don't you have more free time? Well, not very much. So do you see the pattern? It's the overall pattern. Nothing is ever enough. Now, it's understandable because he spent his whole life with nothing. So it would make sense to a degree that the solution to having nothing would be to get everything your way. He didn't ever get anything his way. Doesn't work very well. The pattern is that now nothing is enough, so that no matter what happens now, which is a very recent period of time for him relative to a lifetime, the past has dictated, remember, that the world is terrible. Like I said, I don't remember the number now, 2,952 painful events in a row. So the world is what? Painful and miserable. Duh. Well, now a few positive things have happened, actually quite a few. It wouldn't even matter if the number of positive things that had happened in the present exceeded the number of the negative things that happened in the past. The things that happen earliest have the greatest effect. When he was most plastic, most moldable as a child, he learned that the world is painful and bad. So now he just, in order to be happy, everything has to be perfect. And even then he manages to find something wrong with that. So his judgments were set a long time ago. Recent events are what can change our old judgments. But if we don't trust them, if we're not grateful for our recent events, they don't reset the old judgments. And his recent events were not. He got absolutely everything he was hoping for. He still saw the world as a negative place. We have to reset our judgments. We have to be aware of resetting them or have somebody help us. My last conversation with him was about the fact that he got a new job, which was exactly what he had trained for in college. He couldn't have gotten a job better suited. Many people graduate with a degree in something, and they get a job that's close to that uses most of what they were trained in. He got exactly the job he wanted. He ended up living in exactly the city he wanted to live in. He got the apartment that he wanted. And after 3 days of being at his new job, he said to me, "I'm bored." I demonstrated just about that much sympathy. I said, "And you're bored right now. Right now, as we're talking, you're bored. Because I can see on your face that you're sitting there waiting for me to entertain you on this call. You're not engaged at all, and that's what you do at work. They pay you to do a job, and then you expect them to, hand you the job and make it really interesting and exciting all the time. I've never personally heard of such a job because there's always some degree of menial tasks, some degree of repetition that becomes less than exciting. But you're bored after 3 days." He said, "Well, I don't know what you want me to say." And I said, "You're doing it now. You're not even willing to think for yourself now. You want me to tell you what to say. I don't have a want. I don't have a need for you to say anything. What is your contribution to the call? Where's your part in anything? I realize you were traumatized as a kid, but right now you want the world to come to you and make you happy, and you want to be carried on the shoulders of people and have everybody cheer and clap and feed you cake." I said, "Where's your contribution?" "I don't know," he said. I said, "Yeah, I think you do. You're completely uninvolved. Passive. Get involved. You're completely ungrateful for what you have. You're not grateful for your job and all those other things that I mentioned. And you always want somebody else to change and make you happy. You refuse to take risks. You refuse to really get in there." And he said, "Well, why do you think I do that?" Notice, once again, he's still not really involved. He wants me to give him the answer. I said, "I've answered that question 100 times, easily 100 times, in one word: pain. Pain led to a sense of futility early in your life, because no matter what you did, there was more pain. No matter what you did, nobody cared about you and didn't pay you attention and didn't love you and teach you. So that led to a sense of just futility, and so why take risks? You took risks as a little kid and got rewarded with nothing. So now you see it as detachment, boredom after 3 days of work, a desire to be entertained. Well, that's not working. So now if you want to live differently, you have to choose to do something. That's the straightest I'd ever spoken to him. Mind you, I'm not irritated at him. If he decides to be bored and uninvolved for the rest of his life, my life is just as fun as it ever was. But I spoke to him rather straight because he'd gotten 100 things in a row that he'd wanted, and his response is, "I'm bored." So after speaking to him straight, he said, "Well, do you have to talk to me like this?" I said, "Just like that, what you just did. You just made it about me again. Everybody has to supply you and your needs and entertain you and make you not bored. And now that I've taught you, you're going to make it about me, that I should have delivered it in a different way rather than you doing anything differently yourself. You're bored, ungrateful, and afraid and doing nothing about it. It's a lazy approach. You're waiting for everybody else to do it." Now, to everybody who's listening, we all do this at various times. We go to a meeting, we go to a new city, we go to a new church congregation, we go to a new job, and we expect everybody to do whatever they can to make us happy. In the end, it ends up being what we do. With this man, it will end up being what he does. He either changes his approach or he emotionally dies. And if he keeps complaining like this, he'll lose his job. And he'll continue to have no long-lasting relationships, and he'll lose his ability to live. Now, at the time I wrote this story about this man, I didn't know how he would respond to what I said. But I wrote this, I don't know, a month ago probably. He listened. It was delightful. He's learning to interact with other people at the office. Instead of expecting them to come and be his friend, he's reaching out and talking to them. Instead of expecting the job to become exciting, he's becoming excited about doing a good job. And now he says, I can't believe I get to have a job this interesting. This is a month later. I said, this is the same job that was boring before, right? And he laughed because he realized he really had been selfish and snotty and entitled before. And he's changed his entire world by changing his perspective. It's pretty astonishing. New subject. Here's somebody who writes and says, so when people are late, really late, or mess up in some other regard, I find myself not knowing what to say when they apologize. I used to just say that it's okay, but I realize it's not really okay with me. I feel like a bit of a doormat when I say that now. So today I just said to my friend, I completely understand you're being late. Things don't always go to plan. In the future, if you could drop me a message to let me know how late you're running, I would be grateful. Do you have any other words in response to people who profusely apologize? It depends on the situation. He asked me what I thought or what I do. So for me, it depends. If they're late to a scheduled call with me and they're late more than 3 minutes, I simply cancel the call and move on to something else. And sometimes people will then say, well, but we were going to talk for 20 minutes and I was only 10 minutes late, so I have 10 minutes left. What did you think I was going to do for those 10 minutes? Fold my hands and close my eyes and sit and wait for you? No. I've just learned after 3 minutes, people don't usually show up at all. So I cancel the call, at least about half the time after 3 minutes. I don't have time to wait for somebody not to show up. So I go to another call or I do some writing and I don't answer the call after 3 minutes. And then they profusely apologize later. I don't care about the apology. The fact is, they weren't there. And the reason doesn't really matter to me. I'm managing my time. Notice this is actually an important principle. I'm managing my time, not managing them being late. I'm not making a point. I'm not like, well, you were 3 minutes late, so I'm going to punish you. No, for 3 minutes you didn't show up, so I just didn't have time and I went on to something else. And these days, now years ago, when we would agree to meet somebody somewhere, it was just a disaster because they'd be at the store that you mentioned, but at a different mall on the other side of town, or any number of things. We didn't have cell phones. So I finally got to the point where I absolutely refused to agree to meet somebody anywhere because of the many excuses people had, almost always due to a lack of responsibility. Occasionally there were real reasons, like a flat tire or whatever. But now 4-year-olds have their own cell phone. So being late to something and not informing people, kind of not an excuse anymore to continue, because this person asked me what I do when people are late or whatever, and they apologize. If one person is late to a meeting somewhere with me, I do one of two things usually. One would be I just simply leave. Like if we agreed to meet at a restaurant, I usually give them more than 3 minutes, but if somebody doesn't show up after 10 minutes, I figure they're not really all that interested in the meeting, or they really did have a flat tire or whatever, and who knows? When they had a flat tire, their car flew out the window. Don't know. But what are the odds that they're going to show up after another 10 minutes and another 10 minutes? I'm not mad about it. The behavior just says it all. If they're not interested in meeting, I have other things to do. And again, everybody has a cell phone. Or if somebody's late to a meeting, I wait for half an hour or so if I'm like got my computer and I'm working. And if they apologize, if I decided to wait on them, that's on me. I get to make that choice. So if they apologize, I say, well, I got plenty to do. I was reading on my Kindle or typing a video chat like this one, or writing a blog, so I'm fine. But it does make our anticipated meeting time shorter. So I set a beginning of a call or a meeting time, 1 o'clock. And if we were going to meet till 2:15 and somebody shows up a half an hour late, well, then we've got 45 minutes left. Do you see? You don't get an hour and 15 minutes when you show up half an hour late. So how did they inconvenience me? None. Because I always bring something to do. No matter where I go, I have a book or a Kindle or a computer. Easy. So there's nothing to be upset about. But that's another reason that I sometimes just leave, because I don't randomly choose the length of a meeting. So if I agree to meet with you for an hour and 15 minutes, it turns out there's a reason, because I have an hour and 15 minutes to give you, and I anticipate accomplishing what we need to do in an hour and 15 minutes. And if somebody cuts into it by half by being late, I got half a meeting, and now I'm going to have to meet with you again. So no irritation. It's just my standards of a meeting. I'm not here on a crusade to make people on time, ever. What a waste of a life that would be. But if the other person isn't interested in a meeting, then to me, it's not worth meeting. And usually I won't reschedule because it's pretty clear they don't want to do it. My kids learned this really early at home. If I said we're leaving the driveway at 4, they only had to see one kid try me one time. One. They didn't each have to do it because they're all not stupid. They're in the car, and at 4:01, we're pulling out of the driveway, and the kids, this was back before we had seatbelts and stuff, and the kids are in the back seat, turned around, waving at the kid who's in the driveway. Not kidding at all. It's a good way to teach being on time. Now, it all changes if it's a meeting with multiple people. What if it's a family dinner and there's 20 people for the family dinner and one person is late? Does anybody nag that person for being late? No, we don't care. We just start eating. And whoever is late will miss out on some of the dinner conversation. And if it happens to be that Donna has made a particular family favorite food, well, when they arrive, that will be gone. Who cares? I really just don't care in circumstances like that if somebody's late. Because in great part, I'm just grateful for whatever time I get to spend with them. Now, what if it's a meeting for, I don't know why I'm going into all this, but somebody asked about how do you handle lateness and apologizing. What if it's a meeting for an organization, a meeting for business? If I'm running the meeting, then the late person simply misses that part of the meeting. Sometimes somebody will actually have the gall to walk into a meeting and say, what did I miss? I don't answer the question. They're going to have to figure out what they missed or learn to be on time. I'm fine either way. There are 12 people in the room who can catch them up later, but I'm not going to do that. If they're late twice, turns out, there's a reason they were invited to that meeting so that they could participate in it because they had something to bring. And so being late isn't just an inconvenience. They're hurting 12 other people. So then I have a conversation with them. and say, these meetings matter, or we would not have them. I promise you, I'm not a fan of meetings. You can choose to be late, but eventually your participation in a meeting will be factored out. In other words, you won't be invited to the meeting, or your input simply won't be included in the decisions we're making. If you continue it, eventually you won't be invited to come to work. So, again, no irritation. The short answer to your question is, don't be rude about it. Don't make a big thing about it. It's just not worth bothering yourself over teaching somebody to be on time. You simply demonstrate to them the consequences of their not being on time. And you get to choose how you behave in light of somebody being late. It's your choice how to handle that. Oh, it's so much better than being annoyed at people when they're late. Just infinitely easier. New subject. I know a man who was getting serious about dating a woman. He wanted a real partner. He understands real love, and he's felt the difference that love makes in his own life. So how could he not want a partner who is capable of being unconditionally loving? Now, it's not unconditionally loving in return. What you're looking for is a partner who is capable of being unconditionally loving also. So picture a relay team in running in the Olympics. In a relay team, depends on the length of the relay, but one person starts off the relay and passes off the baton to the next person, and then to a third person, and to the fourth person, who's referred to as running the anchor leg. They choose the people who run the fastest and who can coordinate passing a baton. The first person doesn't run in return for the second person running. The first person runs and the second person runs also. And if all four people run fast together because they all like to, then we have a phenomenal team. Same with a football team, or pretty much any team that you can think of. I don't pass the ball in return for your catching it. No, I pass the ball, you catch the ball, and if we both do that well, then we both win. Same in a relationship. You want to find a partner who is capable of being unconditionally loving also. So this man described somebody that he found. He said that she was beautiful physically, bright, strong, and had a lot of characteristics that he would want. In the beginning, she acted as though she was vulnerable, open, and interested in unconditional love, and he was happy. How could he not be? Yeah, but there's a hook in here, a buried danger that we'll talk about in a minute. She began to be defensive. He was so happy that she showed some signs of being interested in unconditional love that without meaning to, he began to manipulate her to become more involved. And then you start to have trouble. So she became defensive about his manipulation. She said, well, I don't want to be controlled. Now, it turns out that she's the kind of person who would have said, I don't want to be controlled, even if he hadn't manipulated her. She said, I don't want to read some book just because you like it. Yeah, it's a pretty big red flag. Let me translate. I would like to be in a relationship with you, but I don't want to read a book that has to do exactly with how to have an unconditionally loving relationship with you. You're kidding. It's not like he asked her to read a book about calculus or astrophysics. No, this was a book about how to have a relationship with him. And then she didn't want to talk about it. She didn't want to talk about the book. She didn't want to talk about the fact that she didn't want to read the book. Then she started to call real love a cult. That's usually pretty much the kiss of death. And just kind of parenthetically, if you're not listed on a cult site somewhere, you're not doing enough in life. because anybody who does anything that somebody else doesn't like, they end up putting them on the cult site. So eventually, if you're doing good in the world, you'll find yourself there. Pretty much all the world's major religions are on the cult sites. Anybody trying to do any good, when oddly, you can read about this in the PCSD book, the ultimate cult in the world is the family. And we don't talk about that much. Finally, she was just angry and attacking toward him about everything. And the relationship fell apart. She fell apart naturally. Why do I say naturally? Because everything that she's demonstrated here is that she's a defensive, critical, and angry person. That's why the relationship failed. Not because she didn't demonstrate an interest in real love, which is something that interested him. She asked to talk to me by Skype. I said, sure. When I saw her on the Skype screen, she looked like she was sizzling in a frying pan of pain. She just crackled and popped, just so much on edge. She couldn't even control the twitching. Now, perfect looking. As far as she could have been on a cover of a magazine. Perfect posture, appearance. But see, these are the words that you use like when you're describing, a horse, not a person. The dominant thing in her appearance was her pain. The dominant thing in her expression, in her tone of voice, in her choice of words. Despite trying everything, and this is in her own words, in all these years, 35, 40 years, I can't remember, she'd never had a successful long-term relationship. She had every imaginable asset that normally attracts men. And she had no trouble attracting men initially, none. Starting a relationship, getting a first date, a second date. But then she had absolutely no idea what to do with the relationship. None. Because she was angry, demanding, and critical. And it turns out that, by the third date, if a guy feels a lot of anger from his potential partner and he feels demeaned and she's demanding and critical, and it turns out guys don't like that all that much. Neither do women, no matter how the other person looks. So then I talked to him, and he said, so what did you think? I said, well, this wasn't subtle. And I told him about how angry and critical and demanding and she was, which he had already realized by this time. And he said, so here's my question. How did I get fooled? Because I didn't see any of this. He dated her for months before he began to see this stuff. That's the question. I said, you wanted her. You were lonely. And you wanted her to be something. You wanted her to be willing to learn about unconditional loving. You wanted her to be partnership material. He said, well, but isn't it okay to want that? Yes. In fact, yes again. Yes, 3 times. It's okay to want that in a partner. It's okay to establish loving as a standard for a partner. In fact, if you don't establish that as a standard for a partner, you're stupid. Just like we were talking about in a running relay team. You would set a standard of a certain speed, or in this case, a certain time for running a certain distance, as a standard for being on the team. But you don't set that standard for any particular person. You don't pick somebody out of the audience and say, you have to be able to run the 400 meters in X seconds. No, you look for somebody who can already do that, or who is at least well on their way to doing that. And that's the mistake you made with this woman. Instead of setting a standard and then watching to see if she could match the standard, no, you tried to make her do it. You tried to carry her running at that speed, which turns out doesn't work all that well. That'd be like saying that somebody can do the high jump because you throw them over the bar. No, you set the standard, then you observe who can do that. You don't try to get them to. So what happened? She wanted you to be her partner too. She saw that you liked it, just like every child sees when a parent likes something. She saw that you liked it when she was interested in real love. She picked up on the clues from you. You were manipulating her, and she let it happen because she wanted a partner. So she changed who she was for you. She performed so that you'd like her. That's why she was interested in the beginning. But then she got tired of performing, and all of her pain and fears and controlling and criticizing came out like gravel out of a tilted truck, just rushing out in a torrent. It's a vivid metaphor. If you have never heard gravel come out of a tilted truck, sounds like a freight train. And we'll continue the metaphor. As the gravel came pouring out of the tilted truck, it buried you and your relationship. So yes, have standards of loving. It'd be stupid not to. But no, don't ever want that standard from any one person, or you'll manipulate them. So be yourself and be observant. That's it. There you go. You're done. Be yourself and be observant, and you'll find a partner. That's the key to dating. It's the key to other kinds of relationships. It's the key to finding employees. It's the key to wondering who to hire. It's the key to wondering what kind of place you want to be hired by. Be yourself and be observant and see if it's a match. This really works. It's loving, it's kind, it's accepting, as opposed to being demanding and selfish, which is how many of us were taught to be from the time we were little children. I'll see you in a week.